smurfed it up. I apologize, everybody. That happens. It's a starting song for tonight. We'll be back in a minute.
Indian Point, the record done. 60 years along the bed. The plan is closed, but not the end. The Hudson board, the daily waste, outfalls in years of race. Permit signed, the crowd objected. Federal law kept it protected. Now old tag owns the side and tie. Fuel and waste, the slow expire. 45,000 gallons stored. The court unlocked the outlet door. Radioactive Hudson, burning coal. Hotel claims the dose is short. 45,000 gallons sent away. The Hudson bears it day by day. What about day? The state declared the bill was passed. Save the Hudson, make it last. But old Tech sued, the bench complied. The NRC will now decide. A law once meant to guard this stream was overruled in a legal scheme. Dolphin surface sturgeon swam. Milligram counts can't show their path. Radioactive Hudson, hurting core. Old Tech claims the dose is short. Oh, 45,000 gallons sent away. The Hudson bears it by day by day. They call it common, done before. Wastewater carried to the shore. Millennium tallies claim it's small, but none of that explains it all. The irony sharp, the ruling clear. Rights revised to serve Holtec here. Radioactive Hudson, hurting core. Holtec claims the dose is short. 45,000 gallons sent away. The Hudson bears it day by day. Say the Hudson, the voice is cold. The river bears the weight of from Buchanan to the Bay. Families live with what they say. 60 years the plant was run. The Hudson keeps what's been undone.
Hello, and welcome back. We had a rough start here tonight. My apologies. It happens. It definitely happens. I'm Dana. You can call in at 709-740-4076. I just had to check my phone because no one called last night. Just want to make sure I had the right new number there for everybody. It's a new number. be doing? Well, could Fukushima fallout be behind the extinction level event of mass species die-offs worldwide? After 2011, we have seen this mass die-off. All the emaciated whales, all the whales are emaciated, all the birds are emaciated. There's 46 million migratory birds are missing, seabirds, from the East Coast. They never showed up to lay their fledglings. A bit of a shocker for the opening tonight. Sending missiles to Ukraine could trigger a nuclear war. We got a couple of stories about this tonight. So Tomahawk cruise missiles, they got a range of around 1,500 miles. It could be double that. That could be just what they're telling you, which means Ukraine could hit anything with significant technology, including Vladimir Putin's jet, for instance, right? The transfer of American Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine would lead to an escalation and bring the world to the brink of a nuclear war. It's already on the brink of a nuclear war because NATO is using Ukraine as a proxy war. Right, if you look at what was going on in Ukraine before the so-called war started, and think about who Vladimir Putin was participating in the Young Globals leaders with the World Economic Forum when he was younger. Justin Trudeau, Angela Merkel, quite a few current and past leaders. Quite a coincidence, isn't it? That they were all cronies when they were younger. It's an agenda also, but it's real. No Tomahawk missiles will solve the issue of ending the war in Ukraine. It'll escalate the situation. They don't want an end in the war in Ukraine. There was 7 million people left the country immediately. Do you think they were expecting a resolution? It was the elites getting their loved ones out of there, right? You know, mix them in with the refugees, but getting their loved ones out of there. So there was never an intention of a resolution. NATO's been slowly encroaching on their borders for a very long time. NATO, of course, shouldn't even exist. It's a construct. It's 30 militaries. If you look it up, that's what I'll tell you. You see NATO, 30 militaries, and you click on it, it goes to their website. What do you think they're trying to tell you with a placard like that on social media? Let's say the new glasses are a lot easier to clean than my other set, which are getting the lenses replaced. It'll escalate the situation to the point of a nuclear war. And it's, when you see the invasion of all the Anglo-Saxon countries, for instance, Britain has fallen. Ireland has fallen. Scotland has fallen to the invaders, to the immigrants. They're not your conventional immigrants. They're not trying to get a job, right? They're a military age. And if UN decides that there needs to be peacekeeping, who do you think they're going to hire? The Irish, the British, the Scottish? No, they're going to hire the immigrants that they funded to get in there. So there's a lot of posturing going on worldwide. There's a lot of conflict. There's 90 wars going on worldwide. Ukraine is just one of them. It's a very important one because you're talking about there's a lot of nuclear weapons ready to get flying. So if you send a Tomahawk to the crackhead Zelensky, do anybody really think he's not going to use it? And so they got me kettled again tonight today. Brutal numbers again tonight for censorship. Zelensky's not even a politician. Like he doesn't have a pedigree of it, right? He's not a strategic analyst or something like that. He has no qualifications to be a president except that he was a useful idiot. He was put on a pedestal because he's a useful idiot, and he's extremely wealthy. I know that last year his wife had bought a Bugatti for $4.8 million. He couldn't afford that before he became the president of that shithole country. Like, Ukraine didn't have a right to exist before that anyway because it was contaminated by Chernobyl, and it's one of the breadbaskets for a lot of impoverished countries. So it's a breadbasket of radioactive food. So I had 2 votes after 39 minutes, but there was nobody looking at the video, no likes. That's not something I'm used to seeing. Last night we had 14 thumbs up when the show was over. I never seen that before. So they shut my site down. We don't know what they're doing or what they're up to, but they're up to nothing no good. And when you look at the amount of viewers tonight and likes and stuff like that, it's pretty dismal already. And bless your hearts them that are out there and not showing, but that are showing. Nuclear bribery. So let me go back to that. That was supposed to be the thumbnail tonight. We see the same thing with all of these so-called prime ministers and presidents. They're just handshakers. Gets their picture taken. They're not calling the shots. Their job is to look like they're calling the shots, and they got the job because they're, to the orchestrators, they look like they can play that part, and they're willing to play that part. But they're not the minds behind anything. They're just a controversy to keep, the left, right, the far left, the far right, extreme left, the extreme right, the divided unity that's going on worldwide, bickering and fighting over all the wrong reasons. Nuclear bribery backlash in Japan over restart plan for the world's largest plant. This is the Ishikawa Prefecture, right, which is from the Ishikawa Prefecture, the Noto Peninsula, on the east side of Japan, in the Japan sea towards facing Russia and North Korea, South Korea, North Korea certainly. Of course, Japan occupied North Korea for 50 years before the Nagasaki, Hiroshima. That's the only reason they left her. And then the United Nations went there and flattened them, used napalm and burnt down every village, every community, every town, every city. The entire infrastructure of the country was burnt to the ground, razed to the ground with napalm by United Nations. They called it a police action. They had just formed, right? They didn't just form, I guess. They were pre-Nagasaki, Hiroshima. They were there. They were known as the League of Nations, and so NATO was created in response to the USSR's enormous technological advances of the American, the British, the French, and everybody. And so they were very successful. The British, the Americans, the French were always trying to catch up to whatever it is they were conceiving and doing. And when they dissolved the Soviet Union, you got rid of all the patents in the countries, all the pensions in the countries, which was a rotten thing to do. It was a rotten, evil, sadistic thing to do. And then NATO, of course, was created because even together back in those days, NATO still couldn't defeat the Soviet Union, right? They didn't have the fortitude, right, amongst their ranks, so to speak. They still don't today. Today, NATO, of course, was supposed to be dissolved when the Soviet Union was dissolved. And so this nuclear power plant, there was 6,500 homes, January the 1st, 2024, that were sinking because of an earthquake at the Noto Peninsula, 150 miles south of it, right? And which was a 3,500-year-old fault line that had ruptured. So it was a dormant fault line for the last 3,000, 4,000 years. So we'll go in the middle of it, say 3,500 years. And there was like 1,500 aftershocks. There was a tsunami for 100 kilometers. The ocean rose up 13 to 15 feet for about 75 miles. And it dried up something like 6 community harbors permanently. Boats were left out in the harbor under anchor, were all of a sudden high and dry out of the ocean. It was a significant earthquake. And the Niigata prefecture where this nuclear power plant is to, the Kawasaki or whatever it is they call it, there was 6,500 homes that sank because of liquefaction from the earthquake at the Noto Peninsula, Ishikawa prefecture. The Kariwa nuclear power plant. So they got 7 reactors, and these are the Fukushima design reactors, where they stored decades of reactor cores at the top of the buildings. In fact, some of the reactors, from what I understand, still have the reactor cores in them. They didn't take them out and put them in the fuel pools. I'm not sure why they wouldn't do that. Was there damage? Is that why they didn't do it? One can assume that. Because they shut down post-Fukushima. This is a huge facility. This was a fire from an earthquake in 2007. That's the reactor building. And we know nothing about what happened there. Right, you can see one of that big skinny stack there, that's for venting the fuel pool, because the fuel pools are still splitting atoms. Excuse me. I have no idea what happened in 2007 to that reactor. Neither do you or anybody else I know of. All I know is I would assume they lost they had some kind of a partial meltdown, but I can't prove that, unfortunately. They've covered up just about, including Fukushima, they covered up Fukushima. That sounds crazy, but they covered up Fukushima. They successfully covered it up. Let me explain that very quick for you. So it looks like the nuclear industry is terrified of anybody that's having a conversation, actually honest people, right, like us. And so they went the coward way, and they're just going to censor me off the internet, I guess. Typically, though, when they're doing what they're doing to me, through the last couple of times, it was they showed up and arrested me. Usually around this time of the night. No lights, just a single police car. They don't bang on your door, they just gently knock on it. They don't reach in and grab you. They're very calm. They're very polite. So they covered up Fukushima, for instance, which is the worst by far of all the nuclear meltdowns we've ever had on the planet. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. I had redone everything so I can find it. Now I can't find stuff. Hang on, we'll get it. So that's reactor 3, what's left of it to your left. The fuel pools are at the top. These are 19-story, 65-meter, 190-foot buildings. They're 150 feet square, 150 by 150 feet. But there's a, just, the picture I want to show you, or the video. I'll just do the picture, but it's supposed to be right at my fingertips. So I set up a whole new folder so I wouldn't have to look for it. And here I am looking for the picture. Let me just go the other way for a second because you go ahead and you put in all that work and you can't find that one picture that you need. For some, I don't know why that picture wouldn't. You'll see it in a second. Maybe. There we go. Hopefully you'll find it this time. There we go. Let me put it in those other places so I never experienced that delay. So the people to the right, don't think of them, the people, this is ABC Australia. Think of CNN, ABC Australia, BBC. So ABC Australia is the biggest media on that continent. BBC is the biggest media on that continent in Europe. CBS is the biggest media in North America continent. So don't think about the reporters. It doesn't hurt. I got their names there for a reason, but think about the fact that the media had to participate in the lie for those journalists to tell that lie. Right, the videographers, the sound, the makeup, the costume. Nuclear power plants in the United States had to participate in this lie for them to go shoot that particular video. The United States has 70 identical plants. There you go. I just put that picture right at the very beginning of 3 different folders that I always use, so I'll never have an excuse. I don't have one right now. That's the way it played out. So the fuel pools are at the very top of the building. Reactor core is at the very top of the building. This was, by the way, reactor 3 was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. And the emission that you're looking at coming out of there are fuel particles. So fuel splits atoms. The fuel particles are all splitting atoms. So that grows into a continuous radioactive plume that covers the whole planet. Think of mole. This might sound nasty, but let's say you went and got a 1 pound or 1 gallon bucket of mole, and you went in and you painted around your living room, and you went on vacation. This was summertime. You had the doors closed. And when you came back 3 months later, your whole house was covered in mold because mold replicated, right? Radiation is the same thing. It does the same thing in a nuclear accident because the fuel itself, of course, when you take the fuel out and put it in the fuel pool, it's splitting atoms for 1 million homes and businesses. And in every 3 or 4 years, you're getting a whole reactor core in that pool. So after a decade, you got 3 or 4 reactor cores in a pool. So that's 3 or 4 million homes and businesses that you would normally power for those reactor cores. But during a fuel pool with no containment, they're still splitting those atoms. And because of the particular properties of the fuel, if you smash it up, it's all those little pieces are still splitting atoms. And if you detonate it, which is what happened at Fukushima, so when you detonate it, That's reactor 1 detonation. That's reactor 3. You actually ejected the reactor core and the fuel pools out of the building. That's why you see what looks like smoke. That's the fuel rods igniting, the zirconium cladding igniting. And reactor 3 ejected the entire inventories right out of the buildings. Okay. Nuclear is so slick. They're so slick. That's what the best way to describe it. Very slick. How they tell you for 80 years it's like a banana, it's like a potato chip, it's like walking in sunshine, it's like climbing a mountain, it's like sleeping next to somebody, it's like walking in sunshine, it's like 15 minutes in a kayak, it's like smoking 15 cigarettes, not a day, not a month, not a year, but in your entire life. None of these are true. These are just regurgitating the same lies they've been telling for 80 years, generation after generation. So think of this as Fukushima's model based on a small fraction of the inventory I showed you. This is a snowstorm of radiation that grows and grows and grows. When it got to Canada, for instance, United States, it was 220 million atoms per liter. How can you get that many atoms this far away? Well, the radiation that's coming out of there is splitting atoms forever. And so the original plume, the inventory itself is quite enormous, around 6 million pounds per building. There's 4 buildings, they all lost their inventories. Their fuel, their nuclear cores. They had 30 years of nuclear cores. Because you don't have a repository in Japan or anywhere else, you're looking at around 6 million pounds minimum. And we know how it works. Like how much reactor fuel is put into the pool every year. I was impatient to do the show. Night the show started off, I had the wrong volume. It's a lot goes on here to get this show moving. There's a lot goes on. People don't realize, and I'm not going to tell it because the industry is sitting there looking for any insight so they can screw me over. And they already succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Now they're so desperate now. Now they're saying that nobody, all of a sudden 2 days ago, everybody stopped watching my video. Nobody's liking my videos anymore. Nobody's liking my poll anymore. Nobody's watching my videos anymore. I've been doing this show 5 days a week for over a decade. I've been at this 24 years. And so nobody likes somebody like me. No, that's the problem is I'm very likable. The industry does not, under any circumstances, want somebody who's honest, because the nuclear industry is already falling apart. And their investors, when they find me, they're going to pull their money out of the stupid, idiotic, monstrosity scams. Right, so like there is no small modular reactor, there is no micronuclear reactors, there is no fusion. They've been at this fusion, they've been at it for 70 years. They're no further ahead now than they were then. In fact, they're kooky what they're trying now. They're in desperation mode. They're still working on a 1904 patent and trying to use magnets is desperation. Making the world's biggest magnet is just to prove an equation on top of that. They spent like $30 billion for the whole contraption in order to try to figure out can they come up with a way to make fusion work. And it's not for any good reasons. So fusion would power a laser military industrial complex, basically. Same thing with small modular reactors. It's got nothing to do with the betterment of humanity or Earth or the species or... They've already contaminated all the fresh water, all the salt water on the planet. And this is why you see these connotations in a lot of my polls. Could Fukushima fallout be behind the extinction level event, mass species die-offs worldwide after 2011? This is bribery. So they want to give the community $500 million. Not just like give it to them, but they want to throw it around in the community to the fire department, the ambulances, the hospitals, any kind of fundraisers, any kind of things that they can contribute to the community. They want to spend it that way. They want to buy off the businesses in the communities. So $654 million US payout for the locals, but it's not really going to go to the locals. It's going to go into the community, theoretically speaking. And just to clarify, because a lot of times we'll brush over this kind of stuff, because I made this picture 12 years ago. If you've never been here before, you've never seen it before, right? This is just a fraction of the media pretending they're 150 feet above Stumpy to your left, right? The remains of a massive 9-reactor core meltdown. How many people out there, if you believe that it looks like this, 150 feet above the stump to your left? Anybody call into the show? Give me a call at, if you think the fuel pools, during the fuel pools, 709-740-4076. We're in Canada. Let me put that on the screen, my phone number. Because there's got to be somebody out there gullible enough to believe it. Give us a call. I want to hear from you. All lines are currently open. Don't worry, I'm not going to bite you. 709-740-4076 here in Canada. How many people believe that they're on top of the building to my left? They're 150 feet above that stump. Is there anybody believe that? Is there anybody that don't believe that? Yeah, London is hostile. I know. I collected probably 300, 400 videos in the last 2 years of the invaders in London, trying to comprehend it. I do track a lot of things. I just don't do the videos on it. But I have a pretty impressive collection of everything else going on this planet. You're not allowed to talk about 911, right, for instance. You get a lot of strikes every time I talked about it after. There was a point where if I talked about it, they just take your video down and give you a strike, trying to pain compliance, right? Let me just show you some of that kookiness. Some of the videos you took down. Or am I allowed to do that, I wonder? I don't give a shit. The industry's insane anyway, right? Oh, I screwed up, eh? How could I screw that up? I didn't transfer it. Oh, well, that's the way it works for me, unfortunately. I used to have 23,800 subscribers. And you took my site down, right? So let me try one more time. Maybe I'll get lucky. I'll get lucky tomorrow night, maybe. I'll transfer everything tomorrow night. That's weird. There's another way I can show you. That's not what I wanted to show you, so let me go the other way. They done this in at the one time. Just this is a fraction of it. They took down 400 of my videos with court orders. They gave me 6 gag orders for 3.5 years. Well, the real Japanese, please stand up. That video was gone. They took all these videos down at one time. You should say your account has been gutted instead of your videos have been removed. Should Oxford University students taught by Wade Allison get recertified? Part 2. Fukushima proof nuclear scientists like Dr. Calvin Kemp are human trash. Dr. Brian Hanley, he was a disgusting sack of shit, by the way. The world's most disingenuous nuclear quack. Japan is broken. Fukushima, Japan is broken. Took that one down. It's time for Japan to evacuate. Took that one down. Fukushima nuclear public relation firms are the evilest people on earth. And you know they're going to take that one down because that's who's controlling YouTube. Fukushima proves pro-nuclear advocates are mentally unstable. That was a good video. I worked freaking hard on all of these videos. Fukushima, why does Woods Hole claim cesium-137 turns into potassium-40 in bananas? Fucking scumbags. Woods Hole are degenerate monsters. Real-life monsters, eh? Nuclear power, the simple way to kill a planet. And it is, too. We're done. People just don't realize it. Fukushima has destroyed Japan, the Pacific, and the Northern Hemisphere is radioactive. That was a great video. Fukushima, the death throes of the nuclear power. And I was right too, wasn't I? Buesler and Cullen, really scientists and wacko nuclear lobbyists. I got six gag orders because of those two. For 3.5 years was the most they can give it to me. They were the apologists, major apologists. Fukushima blamed the Bilderberg group for the media silence. Fukushima lawyer Gregorio Jasko, former chairman of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I burnt him so good on that one. These were enormous amount of works, each one of these videos they took down on me. They took all these down at one time. The end of governments and elites, Fukushima. Fukushima, the beginning of a new order, and that was right on that one. Alison McFarlane, she works at the University of British Columbia, Canada, and now she quit the NRC, moved out of the United States, and got a teaching position at the University of British Columbia, and she's anti-nuclear now. And she's anti-small modular reactor. We got a story about her tonight, actually. Why is the CBS and Seth Dorn faking Reactor 4 interior videos? I showed you that right there earlier. And again, part 2 of the degenerates. Failure of past dominating president has to change. Took all these videos down to one time. Why does Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley, that's the 3 biggest journals on the planet. They have 20,000 journals between them. Hide your Fukushima peer review studies. There was nothing wrong with these videos. Fukushima shows media outlets. I appealed every single one of them, by the way. Of course, they denied every single one of them within a few minutes. Fukushima shows media outlets literally groveling for the nuclear think tanks. And that was an interesting thing about all the videos they take down. When I appeal it, within 3 or 4 minutes, I get an answer, an email saying denied. We watched your 2-hour video 3 minutes later. We watched your 2-hour videos and you violated the policy, scumbag. Yeah, Ken is just a despicable, disgusting parasite. Fukushima whitewashed by the NRC and the U.S. Congress is disturbing. And I provide the documentation for my assertions, unlike the rest of the scum out there. The deadly silence of nuclear scientists, a violation of trust. Why is the Fukushima Reactor 4 videos being faked by CBS, right? And incredible, beautiful, and Stinkfoot, who's working with Tepco to destroy me, by the way. They called it and announced that, right? At 23,862 subscribers, how many have I got now? 1,700, right? They took down my site when I was out looking for spiders, because apparently that's a crime. What? You're looking for spiders? Take his site down. I'm actually pretty good. I like to think I am anyway, a good person. I work very diligent at being honest. Being honest is easy, because you haven't got to remember a whole bunch of lies. But it's hard because you want to carry on a bit. And you want to make jokes, but you don't want to explain that as a joke every time. So if you're going to do an educational program, you can't. You just got to stick to the facts, and it can't deviate. I can't find. Oh, there it is, Operation Longjap. This is Calm Down Charlie, where he's saying Stinkfoot, the shoe bomber's twin brother. I can't tell the difference between the two of them, right? That's Phil Manson, also known as Thunderfoot, very powerful YouTuber. Now, see, because this camera, the aperture is stuck open. I can't do pictures. I can only do. This is where I was doing a field study. I wasn't on the ocean that day, but I went down on the bike and set up shop to just document any young birds that might have made it to the coastline, to the shoreline. Any fledglings, right? And then Calm Down Charlie, which is the Tepco's little degenerate, calls into the show and threatens me. And apparently, I didn't appreciate the threat, but of course now you do, right? Videos. And if I accidentally click a picture, I have to take the lens off, restart the camera, click a picture, that'll leave it open. Turn the camera off, then put the lens back on and only use video, right? So when you're zoomed way in over to that island, because that's one of our study groups for field studies, and it's good enough, like ideally, the theory was I can shoot the video. I think that's Calm Down Charlie. Should we give it a try? Hello.
Hello, Mr. Dino.
Who's this?
Yoshida Mashada, Tokyo Bureau. How are you?
Is this the Tokyo Bureau Chicago division?
Indeed, yes. Mr. Dino,
how do you like my
about a new.
How do you like my T-shirt I got for you? Do you like my?
Do you
like my T-shirt?
Friend of Tokyo Bureau.
Do you like that?
Tell you about friend of Tokyo Bureau.
You fuck Tokyo Bureau. Fuck you too, you piece of shit.
Radiation
you shut your pie hole.
He know a lot more than you.
Who do?
You're stupid, man. He a friend of Tokyo Bureau, and he is instrumental in helping us launch Operation Long Jump.
How do you spell that?
Operation Long Jump.
How do you spell it? How do you spell it? How do you spell it? How do you spell that? Long jump. Long jump? You say long jump?
Long jump.
Long jump.
No. Operation Long Jump. Get it right, Mr. Dana.
Long jump?
Long jump.
Did you order one of my T-shirts I made for you? You probably got the pink. You probably got the pink one, right?
Stop avoiding the situation.
What do you want, scumbag?
With Tokyo Bureau advisor and friend,
Yeah.
Mr. Thunderfoot, you're gonna be finished. You're gonna be finished, Mr. Dana.
Yeah, I'm all shook up, eh? I'm so scared of you.
You should be. Oh, I would love to be in your shoes. Oh, you make me sick.
Hey, what are you going to be when you grow up?
Okay, sit tight, Mr. Dana.
What are you going to be when you grows up?
Sit tight. We'll be with you soon.
I heard.
See you later, Mr. Dana.
What are you going to be when you grow up? I heard you. It's called Operation Long Jump, and it's about taking me out. And Thunderfoot, to your left there, is the guy that is enabling it. He's the British nuclear degenerate. I had done a response to him at one point that I had like 120,000 views or something on it. And he contacted me and he said he would take down his video of me if I take down his video of him. You gotta be cookie to think I'm like that. So I used to have 23,800 subscribers. When I think I got to 24,000 or whatever it was, and it stayed there for 5 years, never moved. So they want to open that plant in Niigata, in Japan, but they're only going to open 2 of the reactors. They're going to so-called decommission the other 5 reactors. And in Gigawatts is one of the biggest nuclear plants on the planet. But why did they close it? Why is it still closed? And then what happened during that fire in 2007? The plants are not good for the communities because of the possibility of a disaster, as we saw at Fukushima. But if you offer the communities enough, they will eventually agree. Tepco is not earning their agreement, it's buying it. There's one community in Japan, in Fukushima City, where they got 3,000 Geiger counters around the city that only measure in microsieverts. And the community had, I can't remember the number, well, they got 300,000 people there, but they had over 100,000 cesium atoms per square meter, for instance, not counting all the other isotopes. Oh, let me go back for a second. So they're talking about on the island, the prefecture of Hokkaido, which is the most northerly part of Japan, has volunteered as a potential storage site for, I guess, for the nuclear waste. So you got to put it on a ship to get it there. They had a massive earthquake. They covered up in 2016, 2018. Was a 9.8 or something. Just let me show you that because otherwise it's impossible to comprehend why I'm talking about it. Nuclear is such a messed up subject. So they got stink footage coming after me, and apparently what they're going to do is just destroy my reputation, and by proxy destroy me, like to destroy everything else, right? They just Operation Long Jump is the Japanese federal government program to destroy me. So I have a foreign country's government has an operation known as Operation Long Jump, and Yoshida Shada from the Tokyo Bureau, I'm guessing it's the embassy in Tokyo, or Tokyo Bureau, Tokyo Embassy in Chicago, coming after me, targeting me. Just let me show you a little bit of that. Here we go. Almost good to go. Another second. This is pretty special what I'm going to show you, by the way. It's pretty stunning. All right. And this will make sense here in a second. I'm just going to paste this, and away we go. I'll tell that story real quick here. So in 2018, 22,000 people were involved in a rescue effort. So 22,000 people. So they say it was a magnitude 6.6. Magnitude 6.6. Now Japan's scale is based on 7. But a magnitude is the typical international scale, right? Japan's very sneaky, so is Taiwan. They have what's known as a Shindu scale. A Shindu scale is not based on 10, it's based on 7. So you have to divide 10 by 7, get 1.428. 5, 1.429, 1.43. So you got to let's multiply that by 6.6. Even though what they're talking about is the international Richter scale, their scale is on a 7. So they're saying it's a 6.6 magnitude on an international scale, but let's pretend that the 6.6 is 6.6 of a 7. Now, the Shindu scale is 1, 1.52, 2.53, 3.54, all the way up to 7. So it's not like 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 like the international scale. Okay. And they said it was 7 out of a... It was the maximum intensity of 7 on the Shindu scale, but they don't tell you the Shindu scale is a 7. Which is 10 in an international earthquake. The earthquake happened. You see the X up there? Well, you see where the blue is, a little further to your left of it? That's a nuclear power plant. So what's different about that earthquake is it's on land, and it was very powerful. As you would expect a big earthquake on land to do a lot of damage. It shook the payloads off all the mountains for, I don't know exactly how big of a distance, but apparently it was significant. Have you ever seen anything like that before, where all the mountains lost their payloads? You had landslides on all sides of mountains, all the mountains. So like when you're looking at that, it's a little hard to appreciate. Look at the bottom of it. So you're talking about a huge amount of territory. So when you step back and you look at it from like a drone or a plane, it's hard to appreciate it, right? But when you come in a little closer, you can see how big these landslides actually are. You can see like a house over there, give you some scale. And so that was a 9.4 or larger earthquake. They hit it because it was next to a nuclear power plant. 4 million people lost their power, and they want to ship the nuclear waste there, by the way, now. And the only way, obviously, it's going to get there, it has to go by ferry. So if you're on that ferry, you're getting incredible doses from the gamma shines, the neutron bombardments. The trucks need 6 feet thick of lead to shield everybody else on that boat. Cosmic ray muons to help evaluate radioactive material and nuclear fuel debris. See, this is another scam. They want to say they're going to show you the fuel is at the bottom of the container, right? This is a story from the day, October 17, 2025. Wait a second. It's October the 15th, where we're to. So I'm not sure what this Southern Hemisphere wrote this story. Could Fukushima fallout be behind an extinction event, level event of mass species die-off worldwide post 2011, after 2011 nuclear meltdowns? So they want to send these, now they done this in 2012, was it? Version of this. And so they claim that this is hardened against radiation, but it doesn't. Like, have you seen what the buildings look like? You're talking about full exposure. You're talking about melting human organs in less than a few seconds. So does anybody really think all these electronics are going to work in that environment? They got to move it close to make it work. 2011, an earthquake, tsunami, triggered a core meltdown at Fukushima Daiichi. The metallic cladding, this is zirconium cladding of the fuel rods and nuclear fuel within melted. It burns at 1800 degrees. It doesn't melt. Like, there is a scenario where it theoretically can fall apart. Not necessarily melt, but where it degrades and breaks apart because you don't have, say if you lost circulation in the fuel pool has to have water circulating or it's going to melt down for sure. But before it melts down, the fuel will actually degrade and break apart. It's already very fragile because it came out of a reactor where it was bombarded with neutrons and betas and alphas and gammas and X-rays and everything else. So the material is already very fragile. And when I say fragile, if you were able to pick up a single rod, it will break off. And that's a catastrophic event because you're talking about uranium and plutonium pellets that are covered in zirconium. Now, once it catches fire, the zirconium cladding exposed to air will ignite. And like one of those white-tipped matchsticks, right? You hit the right thing, it's going to ignite. And once it starts igniting, it's pretty hard to blow that out until it's actually burning wood, right? So they'll burn at 1800 degrees right away. And it doesn't need oxygen to burn, is the unique thing about this stuff, so-called burn. But it's a different type of burn, like a hot ingot, something heated to 1,000 degree Fahrenheit temperature, steel heated to 1,000, but it's not steel. It's something that there's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against, just the emissions, which are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And so the fuel rods, pellets on the inside of the rods that are coated by zirconium cladding are also coated by zirconium cladding. So the uranium and plutonium is coated with zirconium claddings. So it will burn underwater once it ignites, and the whole thing, so-called burn, will burn at enormous, will radiate at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and they can burn for who knows how long, right? Thousands of years if they ran wild. And they'll just dig a hole down into the earth and burn away for years. They don't need oxygen. Right? They're underwater in the reactor itself, but you're going through 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks of water every day to keep them cool, to keep them in check, and to boil water for millions of homes and businesses. So it's a very powerful thing. So when it runs away, it's nuts. And so it's emitting these neutrons is like a sniper round from 1,000 feet away. In the case of Fukushima, we've seen catastrophic, unprecedented events where the top of each of the buildings had at least 8 reactor cores, and there's 4 buildings. I always show these pictures, Reactor 3 and Reactor 4, because you don't need to be an architect or an engineer to comprehend or appreciate or to imagine that there's nothing left of the buildings. If you've got a morsel of common sense, you're on the same page as me right now. Even if you're the pro-nuclearist weirdo on the bloody planet, you still got to give me that. You got to, right? You can't take that away from me. You can't say, no, it's secret. It doesn't work that way. That means you're a creep. They're gone. And so you're talking about 16 reactor cores, and each reactor core was probably 100 Chernobyls, because Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. It was a small reactor, was a new reactor. And Fukushima reactors are massive reactor cores. There are 30 plus years of fuel at the top of the buildings. And Chernobyl didn't have that particular attribute. Chernobyl was brutal, don't get me wrong, but it's nothing. It's not even a paper towel compared to Fukushima. And Chernobyl was brutal. They closed 9,400 farms in Europe, in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom, 3,000 kilometers away from Ukraine, which is a shithole, a nuclear wasteland. And she'd never been grown food. All the famines after Chernobyl were getting their food from Ukraine. The whole system is just rotten to the core. And that would be the World Economic Forum, NATO, particularly the UN, formerly known as the League of Nations. These are just rotten elements that have co-opted our society and our planet and our biosphere and ecosystem and the biota, and has contaminated with all of it with radioactive fallout. Everything on the planet now has been baking in X-rays, full body X-rays, for almost 80 years. And so you're destroying the chromosomes, the DNA, the cells. Just bear with me. There's a couple extreme ones that I'll point to. We have a lot. It's a pretty complicated story, but it's not if you come here. It's still complicated, don't get me wrong. I shouldn't say it's not complicated. Let me just show you some different isotopes that have been studied, that have been quantified, of covering Canada, United States, and the rest of the planet. And we'll get to that one in a second. Or actually, let's do that one first. So this is the French government. This is a cesium. Radiation levels on the United States West Coast spiked over 1 million times normal. Spiked. Shot up. Went crazy, blah, 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 blah. And you're talking about 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. Now that's based on 8 days. So this was the plume of cesium-137. But cesium-137 plume, this plume has all the other isotopes I'm going to show you in a second. So this is day 20, or day 20 right here. 20 days of radioactive fallout, it covers the whole planet. It never stops after, right? And the reason the plume expands the way it is because the fuel particulates in the explosions are splitting atoms. So imagine putting 100 trillion fuel particulates into the open atmosphere, and each of them are splitting atoms. And imagine they're capable of traveling very long distances. So they're all irradiating, splitting atoms, and radiating everything around them. Wherever the big particulates or fuel particulates are falling, they're going to radiate the grass, the leaves, the branches, the trees. And so when it rains, all of that gets washed into communities or into the oceans or the rivers, the estuaries down to the oceans. You're contaminating all of that with the byproduct of the fuel particulates irradiation. They're going to radiate all of that. So like, if you take a fuel particulate, for instance, and lay it on your counter where you always put your coffee mug, and every day you get a brand new coffee mug, and so every coffee mug that you stop using and put there is irradiated because it's sat in an irradiated environment. So when it lands in the forest, it has the same attribute. And because you're splitting atoms directly, you have a Bromson-Long effect going on. So you got gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas. And so there was another study of 450,000 times xenon-133. The government, the survey would be held by the federal government of the United States for national security, was 450,000 times above detection levels, is in that same plume as the cesium. So it wasn't just 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 in that plume. And that same plume was a massive amount of xenon-133, and by proxy 135, which decays into cesium-137 also. Unprecedented spike of 1,500 atoms of radioactive sulfur. This was the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. And what that means is they're super hot particles. They were ingested by the sulfur created from the enormous temperatures of the burning melted reactor cores that were left that didn't get ejected out of the buildings. But the meltdowns, they were spraying salt water on it and hitting 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. This is something they knew in the 50s. You would liberate the sulfur from the seawater, and it would create these spherical balls. So what I describe as a sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyball because of the way the studies describe it. And so the sulfur creates these spherical balls, and they're very mobile. They can travel long distances. They don't need the jet streams. They're not solutable in water. So they're very dangerous. And they hover close to the ground a lot of the times in certain areas, like in your homes and that. And they can ingest the uranium, plutonium, curium, which is the biggest by the way, curium isotopes is the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rods. So you got sulfur, peroxide hydrogen buckyballs, right? You got the xenon-133 and plus by proxy 135. You got the cesium-137 at an unprecedented amount covering the entire planet, a catastrophic amount, 1 million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima levels. These are incredible numbers because all the cesium released into the environment is still there from 80 years ago. The 80 years of emissions of cesium all around the world, from 1,000 fuel pools, all the nuclear dumps and accidents, is still prevalent in your forests, in your biosphere, your ecosystems, your meadows, because that's where they aggregate. And they get assimilated into plants and branches and leaves and everything else from fruits, of course, into the food. All of that is still there, still active, and the pulse's energy is 600 feet every second. All of it is still out there because it has a 300-year lifespan. So after 30 years, it decays by 50%, but it doesn't mean it decays to something good. So the Neptunium-239 decays in 2.5 days to plutonium-239. So this Neptunium, based on 20 days of radioactive fallout, decays to plutonium by 50% every 2.5 days for 25 days. So there's 10 decays over 25 days because it's a 2.5 day half-life, and every half-life it decays 50% so it only lasts 2.5, it's a nasty isotope on top of that, but it only lasts 2.5 days per decay. It's a catastrophic isotope. It's a bone seeker, so it's caused permanent damage, permanent mutated stem cells, covering the entire planet on top of that. Now remember, the cesium it can go in your thyroid, your heart, and you would expect to see a massive increases in heart attacks and deaths for cardiovascular, heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. And then Neptunium-239 is a bone seeker, and so is by its first decay, which is plutonium-239, which is named after the devil. Okay. So you got cesium-137 at unprecedented numbers. You got plutonium, neptunium at unprecedented numbers. You got xenon-133 and proxy-135 at incredible numbers. You got sulfur peroxide, hydrogen buckyballs that are super hot particles per cubic meter you're talking about. Now, there's an effect that goes on with all of these different isotopes I'm about to explain to you. At 1 million confirmed on the ground of another isotope, you have 20 million particles of iodine-131 per liter in the United States for every, which is nasty. And there's 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133, 31 times more iodine-129. Yeah, right there. Per liter in Canada. These are Canadian studies, by the way. That hang on, bear with me. Get back on track here. So this was a study out of Canada. It can't be an iodine-131 unless you pulse energy at the speed of light every second, or any other anthropogenic man-made isotope. 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129. These are, so you saturate the thyroid glands in the bones of every species on the entire planet. If 500 trillion atoms per kilogram of BQ is a becquerel, it's a pulse of energy every second from that isotope. So here's the problem. I think we got one more there. Very high concentration of plutonium and americium. Very high concentrations. And so, okay. So the problem with, you got xenon-133, 135, that's two isotopes. You got neptunium-239, that's three isotopes. Decays to plutonium-239, that's four isotopes. You got cesium-137. You got 500 trillion atoms of radioactive glass. I'm not even sure what isotope that is. A 6. You got iodine-129, a 7. These are incredible numbers. You got 131 is 8, and you can't have 131 without a 132, 133, that's 10. And the 132 and the 133 iodines are 9 times more effective at ionizing and radiating your thyroid gland than incredibly effective iodine-131 is. And you got 11. So that's 11 different isotopes. So the best way to think about it, when you look at this plume, we have confirmation of very long-lived isotopes and very dangerous, harmful, catastrophic to everything with replicating cells in the entire biosphere, in the entire ocean, in the entire soil, the biota is. So you have 11 different isotopes. You got gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas, and they're all exploding almost at the speed of light. Like cesium will explode 600 feet every second, almost at the speed of light. It's going to hit the gamma, the other gamma, or the neutrons, the betas, the alphas, and they're almost at the speed of light, almost 270,000 miles per hour. And so when they explode, and they hit the gammas, the alphas, and neutrons, and betas are hitting each other. He's coming in almost the speed of light. They're coming in almost the speed of light. They don't mingle. That energy, gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas, have a ricochet effect. But it's different because it's almost at the speed of light. And so when they clap, almost at the speed of light, imagine two objects hitting almost at the speed of light and changing direction. It's described, we call it an X-ray. So you've got gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas, and X-rays symmetrically covering your entire planet, all your soil, all your metals, all your fields, pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. And that's gonna destroy the biota, the bacteria, the fungus, the species, the microscopic creatures that breaks down the foliage and the litter in the forest, and then everything else. Of course, all the little birds and insects, mammals and animals are getting full body, massive, brutally, minimum full body X-rays, but they're getting everything else because it's not going to go away for millions of years. And we've been releasing it at 1,000 fuel pools for 80 years. Well, I don't know if we had 1,000 fuel pools 80 years ago, but we've got 1,000 fuel pools for the last couple of decades. We've had absurd amount dumped into the soil. And so this X-ray effect, by the way, for all the species in the forests and the meadows, is known as the Bromson lung effect. It's your full body X-rays on top of that. And when they're smashing each other, there's this incredible, this is real. We're all getting full body X-rays. So for humans, for animals, what happens is that it's very difficult for the babies to survive when they're exposed to those types of charges. When that's now their new environment, which they're not designed for. There's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. And we're not talking about consumption. We're just talking about, envelope. You're in this constant bombardment of frequencies, very harmful frequencies, and your body doesn't have, or animals or birds or whales or any other species don't have an autoimmune trigger that can defend against that kind of energy. And so what happens is you're also going to be breathing it in and drinking it and eating it and doing your laundry in it and getting showers in it and washing cars and that splashing on it. When you're out in the rain, it's getting on you and your clothing. You're putting it in your laundry, contaminating your other clothing. Like there's no redeeming qualities. And I know I'm a fucking nobody. I get that. Okay? I got 17 people on my show. I got 19 likes and 21 votes on my poll. I know I'm a nobody. I get that. That's okay. The industry doesn't have to shove it down my throat. I get that. But, get this. I'm not fucking going away. I'm never going to give up. I'm never going to sit down. I'm never going to say I'm beat. I'm never going to say the planet is not worth fighting for. That'll never happen. That's never going to happen. And anybody that finds me and is benefiting, getting educated by this, are going to be the exact same way. This is an educational program. And it's the only one that's ever come out and challenged the nuclear industry in its entire history. I'm very humble. I live a very incredibly humble life on top of that. And this is all I do. 24 hours a day, I do nothing else. And the job is to tell the story, be completely accurate, and make sure that anybody that happens upon it walks away better for that encounter. And so if you look at Chernobyl, you look at, you hear about the United States, the biggest nuclear accident in the United States is allegedly 3 Mile Island. You read it everywhere. No matter where you go, you hear that story. Santa Susana in 1957 or 1959 was a sodium reactor melted down at the Rocketdyne site. And it released 460 times more radioactive fallout than 3 Mile Island, which was brutal, by the way. Now, Hanford had dumped 450 billion gallons during the Manhattan Project of radioactive sludge into 41 miles of unlined trenches and into the Columbia River themselves. There were spots on the banks of the Columbian River that were measured at over 70 sieverts an hour, which meant the fishermen drifting by there theoretically got a lethal dose and would have died that week or within a few weeks. As a mystery to the doctors, of course. They dumped 450 billion gallons directly into the soil. And what that means is, because it's hard to visualize it, right? So let's put it in the context of an aquarium, 6 feet wide aquarium. It would be 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet. More than once. 518 foot tall, 6 foot wide wall of nuclear waste, splitting atoms, by the way, wrapped around the entire planet more than once. That's just one example. It's just a single example. All the national laboratories in the United States were built on the biggest aquifers in that part of the country. And then those aquifers each of those aquifers are feeding 10, 15, 20,000 farms and millions of peoples in the big cities for their drinking water. Almost every nuclear power plant on the planet on top of that is surrounded by farms. They already poisoned every farm on the planet from the radioactive fallout, and the emissions from a nuclear fuel pool into the farms. It's hard to appreciate. Let me show you some of that. The emissions from the fuel pools at every nuclear power plant into the farms are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Japan, the food was banned by 55 countries for a decade. So they replaced those people, as many as they could, and started importing the food. The food is for sale because he's not wearing his paper suit, which is useless, by the way. He's in a nuclear wasteland, and there was 30 million one-ton bags, that's some of them right there, grown food and harvesting it right alongside of it, in the middle of a no-nuclear wasteland. And they grow each prefecture, each one of these markers, you're talking about 1 billion pounds of rice minimum. This is what evil looks like right there. The fuel pools are all splitting atoms. They can't be contained. They're vented into the local area. And why is the local area always surrounded by farms? Why would you do that? What is the catalyst for doing something like that? And what's the best way to poison everybody? With radioactive fallout from the fuel pools and a whole bunch of accidents and dumping. When you think about all the dumping that they've done it all over the world, every country, the amount of dumping. This is the Mississippi River. I think that's Montebello. I can't remember. Don't quote me. So that feeds around, that river is feeding around 20,000 farms downstream. They have had massive accidents at the Montebello nuclear plant on the Mississippi River. I'm not claiming I'm the best or anything like that. Never have, never will. I'm doing my part. I'm doing the best job I'm capable of, and I try to get a little bit better every day. I've been at it for 24 years. Because it's not a game. And the nuclear industry pissed me off. And that's a big mistake. My dad used to say, never give Dana a cause. That's the worst thing you want to do. Not because it was a bad attribute, it's because that's how I was raised. I was raised to find a worthy cause and pursue it. I am what I was supposed to be. I was raised to be exactly like I am now. And as luck would have it, I have the perfect pedigree to do what I'm doing. My life couldn't be any more perfect to end up where I ended up. So if farms are not an issue, why does radiation get soaked? Why are all these studies showing that food sucks up radiation? Do you like grapes? Yeah, you must like cesium-134 and 85 strontium too. How about strawberries? You like that? Because cesium and strontium, uranium, plutonium does. Accumulation of radionuclides by plants. Do you eat anything that plants are the byproduct of? Congratulations. You're now a victim. Foliage and root uptake of cesium, strontium, zirconium processing tomato plants. You like tomatoes? Grapes? Strawberries? Potatoes? Well, the nuclear industry got a great deal for you at the supermarket. You get it pretty cheap. If you took a Geiger counter to your supermarket, you would run away screaming. So knowing that the food gets sucked up by radiation, why are nuclear power plants surrounded? By farms, right? Is that a crazy question? Am I a lunatic for asking a question like that? If radiation is harmless, why do you have terrorist laws? Why do you talk about dirty bombs to contaminate a city with just a gram? How about 6 million pounds out of each of the buildings of Fukushima? How much could that contaminate? Why do you think almost every single nuclear plant on the planet is surrounded by farms? Because if you're too sick and too weak, you can't fight back against a machine that is very established. Right? It's assimilated into everybody's life. Oh, nuclear is carbon-free, Dana. Okay, moron, whatever. I don't waste 2 seconds on people like that. Because they're not real. They're not willing to have a debate, a conversation. Why is every nuclear power plant, except for a few, surrounded by farms? Because that's the quickest way to make everybody sick. 50 atoms a kilogram of cesium-137 is irreversible heart conditions for children. So after seeing this, if somebody says, I'm going to give you a bunch of farmland alongside a nuclear power plant, you can take over my business, because I'm sick, I got cancer, are you going to jump on that opportunity? And girls have six times more breast cancer within 15 miles of a nuclear power plant. So if you had a bunch of daughters, would you move there now? Would you go down in the middle of that half of Japan, knowing that the food was banned there, food was banned by 55 countries? Let's get back on the... Resolidified as fuel debris. So they're talking about the muon. Remember that story? That's way back there. So anyway, we're talking about using sophisticated technology. That's a long way back. What was I thinking? Let me get rid of everything we just accidentally jumped on. There it is. I'll make it easy. So they're going to put this sophisticated device. We'll get to the logistics now. The study revealed that muon scattering measurements lasted for just a few hours can predict nuclear material amounts in the debris with reasonable accuracy. But it ejected the entire nuclear core into the environment and the fuel pools right out of the buildings. Oh, we'll make that decision, Dana. Oh, I skipped ahead, did I? The muon scattering method is highly sensitive to high atomic number materials like uranium. But there's nothing can survive in the environment that Fukushima has. The most challenging part was developing a prototype scanner capable of operating in a radiation environment. Our muon scanners resistant to radiation can identify muon events even in the presence of gamma rays. So they think they can do a X-ray type of this site and determine where the fuel is. You don't need an X-ray machine, a muon machine, to determine the fuel is ejected and lost right out of the building, because you have so much evidence of it happening, right? You have videos of it happening. Videos. Let me show you one of those. This is the Great Reactor Tree. 3, we call it on the East Coast. 3. What you're going to see, this is slow motion, you're going to see the reactor core and the fuel pools falling back down to Earth, and they're going to leave a big trail of what looks like smoke behind it. That's fuel particulates, and they're all splitting atoms. And as that spreads out the whole planet, this thing just keeps replicating itself like some kind of because you got so many microscopic pieces, and a lot of the tsunami debris was covered with these particulates too. So we spread it far and wide in the Pacific Ocean. And because it destroys the biota in the ground, the ground doesn't break down the foliage in the litter anymore, and it doesn't soak up water anymore because you kill the fungus, bacteria, and the biota. The whole system that breaks down the recycling of all the plant matter, insects, and dead animals, all this tree branches and all the rotten, the foliage in the litter that normally gets broken down by these microscopic animals and the bacteria and the fungus, which needs water to work. And so by wiping that out, which is what we've done, and we know that from the Chernobyl, how that played out down there, now we can see the same attributes because of Fukushima worldwide. So then you would assume you're going to see an increase post-Fukushima of flash floods, catastrophic flash floods, because the ground is not soaking up water anymore. And because of that, it's soaking up heat. And so now the trees are becoming dried out. We're that 14, almost 15 years down the road. So the problem with the trees, they have sequestered 80 years of radioactive fallout. And you can't destroy that in a fire or incinerators. Japan burnt millions of pounds of highly radioactive litter from the tsunami. They grind it up and shipped it to other prefectures. They burned it in their local incinerators. There was three incinerator workers, three workers at an incinerator, one of them in Tokyo, all had heart attacks within a couple of hours of each other. And that was because of the radiation in the garbage. But you see entire communities get sick when they started shipping the stuff to communities and burning it. All of a sudden, the entire community was getting sick, nosebleeds, diarrhea, vomiting. So the only way that we can have a plume covering the entire planet is if it replicates itself. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't make it that far. And what does is more trees, more plants, more insects, more birds, more puppies, more life. This we're only looking at right now, 20 days covers the entire planet. How is that possible? Because it's replicating. The fuel particulates, they were microlized, they were microscopic, are splitting atoms. Each of them are splitting atoms, and they landed on top of that all around the world eventually. So there's no way you can harden that so that it can work. Like if that was real, they would have brought that there twice a year, every year for the last 14 years. They just showed up there in 2012 or early 2013. They claimed they'd seen all the fuel inside the building, but they didn't. I missed a headline on this story. The 11th East Asian Nuclear Forum. Nuclear power industry of Korea, China, Japan, Taiwan shared the importance of nuclear plants for power supplies in the age of artificial intelligence. Korea Atomic Industrial Forum said on the 15th that it co-hosted the 11th East Asian Nuclear Forum. So how many of those countries have also decided to censor my videos over there, right? Through the Operation Long Jump. A long chap. I was torturing him I was doing that to him on purpose, right? Japan's Atomic Industrial Forum, China's Nuclear Energy Association, Taiwan Nuclear Association, and Taiwan is phasing out the nuclear. They just shut down their last nuclear plant, actually. They just failed to have a referendum, or failed rather, to open up one of their plants, reopen it. That's not going to stop them from yet. Look at them. They're down there at the East Asian Nuclear Forum. Asia, of course, is 6 billion people. So Taiwan, all of these players right here, Taiwan, China, Japan, International Atomic Energy Agency, South Korea, all conspired to hoodwink the Asian population into thinking Fukushima was a non-event. Right? And they've been doing that with the alleged water releases. The water's never stopped coming out of Japan. You can't contain the water. Yet 36 reactor cores melt down in 8 buildings, or 4 buildings, and 8 fuel pools. The numbers for these, I think, was 5.5 reactor cores per decade goes into the fuel pools at each building. So these were over 30 years old. So you can count on half of that fuel still being there. It takes over a decade before you can move it, or more. A lot of fuel you can't move because it's very fragile. It's got billions of microscopic cracks on top of that from the Wigner effect, the neutron bombardment, the beta rays, the alpha shines, the gamma shine. At this forum, more than 80 experts, 80 traders from major nuclear-related institutions in Korea, Japan, China, Taiwan, right? South Korea, Japan, China, Taiwan, International Atomic Energy Agency, of course, is probably paying for everybody's plane tickets. Japan donated, in one donation, $19 million. They're the third biggest donor to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Delegation leaders from participating countries shared their view that nuclear power must play a key role in meeting electricity demand. See, and this is what they do. Like, we got out there panicking going around. We got to get this going. They don't have small modular reactors. They don't have micro reactors. They don't have fusion. They're not going to. There's no more gigawatts today than there was in the 90s. There is no nuclear renaissance. And climate crisis, which is the garbage can excuse, right? Nothing else, blame it on climate. All the whales are emaciated. After Fukushima broke the food chain, no, Dana, that's climate change. Well, show us your evidence. I'll show you how climate is created by the nuclear industry for 80 years. The East Asia Nuclear Forum was launched in 2013, 2 years after Fukushima. It was launched in response to Fukushima and to consult on ways to revitalize the nuclear industry because of Fukushima. And their version of making that work, right, is to pretend it looks like this instead of like that. To Photoshop people, zombies, doing nothing around reactor 4 stump. Underneath reactor 4, it looks like reactor 3 to your left. This is Photoshop. This is not even real on top of that. No one knows what the hell they're doing there, including them. But that's a Photoshop picture. No one knows what he Photoshopped it. So is this one. That's a Photoshop picture too. See, this was at the top of reactor 4 when it melted down and lost 9 reactor cores that were in the fuel pool. That is so radioactive, if you got that close to it, you're getting like a fatal dose. That's a fatal dose, right? That's why these people are pretending they're in Japan on top of a building that don't exist. Like when you look at the building originally, there's no illusions that they lost the inventories, right? Frank von Hippel also made the assertions there could be 7 or 8 or who knows how many, because you can have 5.5 reactor cores each year at the top of the buildings in the 2 fuel pools.
And if, in terms of what we know about the capacity, about how many fuel rods would likely be inside that reactor, what sort of quantity are we talking about radioactivity?
I've heard different numbers ranging from 2 to 15 reactor cores worth. No, 2 to about 8 reactor cores worth.
So if it can't be controlled, that's worst case scenario, 8 reactors worth of radioactivity.
Right. Right.
And it would be released into the atmosphere.
Radioactivity. By the way, the fact that this has happened at unit number 4 is understandable and is consistent with the theory that it really did dry out because the fuel from the unit number 4 was most recently discharged. Okay. And therefore was the hottest, and therefore the water would have boiled off more rapidly.
So he's talking about 8 reactor cores at the top of each of the buildings. In reactor 4, he's talking about particularly, but they're all the same age, the same size. Let me see here. Where the hell am I? Oh, there I go. Why big tech's nuclear plants could blow up. Why big tech's nuclear plants could blow up. Eager to find new energy sources to power artificial intelligence, big tech companies are betting on nuclear, even though there are still huge questions over public perception, cost, and perhaps more importantly, the time it will take for a new nuclear technology to become viable. You're looking decades. There's 660 gigawatts of solar came online last year alone. For many Americans, dropping 3 Mile Island into a conversation like mentioning Fukushima or Chernobyl, nuclear disasters, no explanation allegedly needed, but there is because most people have no concept of what 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl or Fukushima actually is. The actual history is more complicated, and BBC ain't going to tell you the truth. They love to use the word partially melted down, and what is to this day the most serious nuclear accident in United States history. It's not, it's Santa Susana. It was equal to 460 3 Mile Island emissions. And 3 Mile Island was a huge amount came out of there. There was a study done many years later on the cancer clusters post 3 Mile Island, up around the Susquehanna River in Pennsylvania. And what they showed was massive cancer clusters. But the homeowners, there was a lot of people eventually ran away after Dick Thornburg finally said it was okay to evacuate. They didn't want anybody to evacuate because they looked bad for the nuclear industry, right? 3 Mile Island is the reason you have up to 140 sirens around some nuclear power plants within 10 kilometers, for instance. He changed all the policies. 100 plants were shut down. But when people came back home, they found their pets who were left behind, and a lot of them just left their kitchen windows open, their doors open. It was summertime. You can do that back in those days. You didn't have to worry about it. Today, the invaders, the migrants, will just walk right in your home, right, and do something horrifyingly. And when they came back to their homes, their pets were blind or dead from radiation. They didn't appreciate it. I mean, when it happened, a lot of people ran when they had a nuclear meltdown at 3 Mile Island. People wanted to go see what it looked like. And no one said, no, this is not a good idea. Even the police done it. They're like, honey, you bring the camera, get that Polaroid. Well, you see that thing on picture. Too bad we weren't like the dentist in town. He has a camera with a zoom on it. You can't, right? So here's BBC, of course, which is the biggest media in Europe. But it resulted in just a small fraction of damage caused by Japan and the Soviet Union. No fatalities. Of course there was huge fatalities. And it wasn't just humans. There were pets and other animals in the forest. There were no fatalities, few of any long-term health effects. One of the studies, I found it through a story, and he said that the 2 million people that did get irradiated because of 3 Mile Island, they acknowledged 2 million people got irradiated. They said it was equal to watching color television for an extra year. And that is some sick... I think that's the only time, it's not the only time, but it's one of the rare times when I heard that connotation. Now, I'm not saying watching TVs in 1979 wasn't friggin' extremely harmful. And the frequency of the TV was the same as the human child's brain. So the child on the morning of school, you call them, say, hey, you got to get ready to go to school, go brush your teeth. And you couldn't get their attention. It wasn't they weren't ignoring you. They were sucked in by a frequency. It was designed that way as a weapon. And so then you would send a child in the bathroom to brush their teeth. And of course, the industry is pretty sadistic. They knew that if they put sweetener into a fluoride-laced toothpaste, the children would swallow it. Now, I'm not going to recommend you do this, but I done an experiment one day, because I'm an idiot. And I filled up my toothbrush like a big stick of toothpaste. I only use a little tiny, after that I've only used a little tiny, or before that even, I only used a little tiny bit. Like it's not as big as, almost maybe as big as the tip of my thumb. And I don't use fluoride anyway. I use natural stuff. But I still only use the very tip of it. And I had filled up the whole toothbrush. I went and bought a brand new tube of toothpaste, filled it up, and ate it. It dropped me. For about 2 minutes. For 2 minutes, if you were there, you would have called the ambulance. That's how bad a shape I was actually in. Heart rate just went straight down. My brain went dormant. I was just lit there. I couldn't do anything. Moaning and groaning, and went on for about 2 minutes. And then I came around pretty quick after that. But for goodness sakes, don't do it. That was a horrifying experience. So imagine that happening to a child. Imagine a child taking a big chunk of that and eating it before he goes to school because it's so sweet. You know they're doing it. So you're yelling, come on, you got to go to school. And they're like, oh, I'm not feeling good. And they weren't. They were feeling like they would have been way worse off than I was. And I was brutal. That was brutal. And to a child, they don't understand. They don't make that connection, right? They'll do it again and again and again. Like I did. No, I'm just kidding you. Saying there's no fatalities, no health effects, no long-term adverse side effects is just the typical evilness of this industry. It's perpetually evil. Doesn't have not a single redeeming quality to it. Nuclear could help meet the challenge in two respects. It's a potential source of always-on energy, and unlike fossil fuel, it's carbon-free. Like suggesting, and then they show you this picture, of course, the most resource-intensive industry in human history. Right, because that's what social engineering does, right? Shows you the worst image the government does to you and tells you that it's not an issue in their own way, through grammar. This is the Neptunium-239, which decays plutonium in 2.5 days. So what would you rather have? Carbon, which makes more birds, more insects, more plants, more trees, more fruits, more puppies, more children, more life. Or radiation, which kills every species, every child, every animal, every mammal, every biota. How can you look at this project in the United Kingdom and say that is somehow carbon-free? That's just one of the reactors. It's hard to comprehend the scale of what you're looking at. But in the background, I hope you can see all the farms. Here's an idea of the scale of the site. Would you like to pay the electricity there for 1 day? Each of these plants are dependent upon 2 dedicated gas, oil, and coal plants. 2 of them. This one might even have 3 because it's so big. Each reactor needs 6,450 tons of water every 24 hours. It's equal to a row of 1-ton trucks, bumper to bumper, with 1,000 liters in the back of each of them, wrapped around the entire planet. Has to be dumped into the reactor in less than 24 hours. It's 4,500 tons a minute, 1 million gallons a minute. And the ocean water would have 1 billion creatures per glass of water. So take that each day and divide it into glasses of water, and then each glass of water would have 1 billion creatures. 75 to 100 million per glass of water, is the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestration chain. You know, just the most important species on the planet. And the rest is the eggs, the larvae, the sperm, the milk, the biota, the soup of life that is the ocean, right? It's sterilized. Like the numbers are just, it's just something else. For a bit of fun, let me do the mathematics for it. Just for kicks. That's not what I wanted. That's my initials, by the way. Why can't I figure this out today? Where's the show all button? Getting stupid today, I think. I put it right there. Sometimes I forget. So 4,500 tons a minute. Multiply it, which is 1 million gallons a minute, sorry. Because it's easier to do it that way. So it's 1 million gallons. Multiply it by 1,440 minutes a day. Then multiply it at 1.4 billion. Multiply that by 1 billion creatures a day. It's an enormous amount of creatures, right? And multiply that by 412 or 413 nuclear plants worldwide. That's one of the most frightening numbers imaginable. And then if you take that number, and just take this number, you got the fuel pool has 8 reactor cores. 8 reactor cores that are splitting atoms before that for 8 million homes and businesses. So 8 million, this is every minute. So 8 million first, there is no mathematical equation for it. So how do you take 8 million? So a nuclear power plant provides electricity for 1 million homes and businesses, right? It does that by splitting atoms. Now, how many atoms does it take to boil a glass of water? If we can figure out that equation, then we can do some mathematics of how many atoms are released from the fuel pools every day. So the same amount of atoms it takes to run 1 million homes and businesses for 24 hours is what's released from these sites every 24 hours from the fuel pools. Multiply it by 8, and you have 8 million, which is what's in each of the buildings, by the way, not just one building, but each of the buildings. So if you got 4 reactors, multiply that number, final number, by 4. So these are both the official picture of Reactor 4. That's the current official picture, and that's what it used to look like. That part of it would be 150 feet above the stump you're looking at, which happens to be a nuclear meltdown. We don't know if it was a hydrogen explosion. It wasn't a hydrogen explosion. It was a pressurized explosion. The reactors are already pressurized at 1,000 pounds per square inch or more, right? So when the reactors blew up, or that's dropping water on the reactor, that's the wrong one. The reactors blew up because if you don't have water, it goes from 1,000 pounds per square inch upwards really quickly. And you need 4,500 tons of water a minute to keep it cool when it's run away like it was. And because we couldn't get water to it, right? It kicked out the reactor core itself, which happened to be a plutonium mixed oxide reactor, blew up because the pressure increased. You had no circulation. It didn't have any cooling water. Even if there's no circulation, it'll eventually do that. But you're talking about it went from 1,000 pounds to 2,000 to 2,500 pounds, and it ejected the fuel pools in the reactor core straight up into the buildings. And so the cover-up was they pretended that they went in and took fuel out of the pool, which was 150 feet above the stump, and they lowered it down that this truck was actually in the building. These are incredible, bizarre assertions. It's simply not possible when the building doesn't exist. You can't do that. There's no voodoo science behind that. Just let me finish up with a couple of bizarre legacy headlines. 2011. Baby food maker ignored the information on the cesium contamination for weeks. Well, in Canada, United States, was 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. How bad was it in Japan? So this was brutal baby food, and they just pretended it didn't happen. They didn't want people to panic. If the worker goes home and says, we got to stop because the food is contaminated for a few days, because they're stupid and don't know any better, eventually people like me are going to find that information. That's their fear. Pregnant women get a free new house if they move back to the nuclear wasteland. Children are being severely harmed, must be evacuated. The world has never come across a situation like this. Such a true statement, eh? Pregnant women used for decontamination activities. What does those two stories tell us? They get a free house if they move back to the nuclear wasteland? That's different. This is October the 30th, 2013. This is August the 9th, 2012. Pregnant women get used for decontamination activities after Fukushima. What kind of culture does stuff like that? Well, Japan is one of the sickest cultures you'll ever see. Japan is one messed up culture, buddy. I would never let anybody on purpose go to Japan. X-ray-like images show how radioactivity spread throughout the bodies of the Fukushima wildlife. So they were able to determine through that one there that all the wildlife was completely contaminated. How can you not have the humans contaminated? X-ray-like images show the spread of radioactivity in the trees and plants and the fruit trees shows the spread of radioactivity equivalent of miscarriages, stillborn, congenital malformations. Air samples in Tokyo 270 times more contaminated just with cesium-137, which meant in order to get there, you had to contaminate everything on the way. Then global weapons failure peak. These are absurd numbers. And Tokyo is 36 million people in metropolitan Tokyo, by the way, don't you know? Just to give you a little more insight, that's all, of how kooky and batshit crazy that culture is. Now they contaminated the whole planet, they don't care. No big deal. We're nuclear. We're better than you. We're better than everybody. We're allowed to do stuff like that. You don't have rights. And the nuclear industry has rights, and they have a right to consume all the resources on this planet. And if you're in the way, they have a right to make you sick and get rid of you. There's no hard feelings. It's just the way it is. Being evil is just natural. It just comes to them like the predator cowards they actually are. Hello, everybody. We've done better than I thought we were going to tonight. I smurfed up the beginning of the show. If you go back to watch the beginning of the show, the first couple of seconds are a bit of a I screwed up the volume, big time. Can't remember the last time I done that. About time I screwed up, I guess. Some big numbers on the Geiger counter tonight, which we're expecting because Japan just had a massive earthquake in Fukushima, which happens to be 2 kilometers away from the ongoing nuclear meltdowns. I covered, you need to watch those videos if you're not familiar with this. It's very important. The radioactive fallout we're talking about is very real. We just done a video about the 3 whales in the St. Lawrence here in Canada. 3 emaciated grey whales. The scientists say they don't know why the whale died. They refuse to call it emaciated. Don't worry, they're going to get the natives to tow it somewhere so they can do a necropsy on it one of these days. They were there, stood up in their fancy, their special uniforms. Their tidy little uniforms. What are you going to play tonight? James hasn't posted anything. He's probably burnt out. He's been at it hard for a long time. We got Nuclear Exceptionalism. It's a pretty good song, man. We got Less Than a Gram. These are both my favorites. Atomic Corruption. The Enrichment Man. I love that. The Scientist and the Blob. That's such a great song. Pink Hydrogen. Don't forget Meltdown Queen. Radiation cream boxes. They took food from the nuclear wasteland and turned it into a fancy kids' meal lunchbox type thingy. And James comes out and bludgeons him. Great song. It's a great song. Escapement Denied. Radioactive Hudson, we started to show off with tonight. The Strandings of the Flirt. That's such a great video, man. And all of these are great videos. He does all that and the music. Let me see if we got anybody in the comment section saying something. Thanks, John. So I just gave you a list of songs. Uranium Freelancer. How do I call it? Just waiting for somebody to tell me which song to play. Less Than a Gram, Nuclear Exceptionalism. It's anti-nuclear. This is a great anti-nuclear. That's a real anti-nuclear anthem right there, right? We're probably going to play that one. Atomic Corruption. The Enrichment Man, The Scientist and the Blob. I'm actually going to do a show on a lot of these videos and cover the story that, if he was, had linked below it. Because I think it'll be really fun. Something cool for a change. Your Escapement Denied, the first one. The first one. You know, one we haven't heard in quite a while was Calm Down Charlie's song. We played Calm Down Charlie, didn't we? Let me see if I got 3 of them there. I don't know which one is which, though.
In the Tokyo Bureau, swirling smoke and neon beams. Chicago division, fueled by heated dreams. Calm down, Charlie calls in, voice smooth as silk. Says, Dana, you're dreaming, don't cry over spilt milk. On Dana Durnford show, the chatter's turning wild, but Charlie shoots it down with that cool cat style. Unit 3's no killer, no harm to see life. He chuckles in the static, cuts through the strife. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm.
He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show. With a snap and a grin, Charlie's voice so clear scatters the dread, dispels all the fear. Mux didn't hurt, he croons with a sigh. Science is for thinkers, not a whim or lie. Though Dana and the crowd may shout and roar, Charlie's unfazed, he's heard it all before. His swinging rationale, like a soothing song, says hold on to logic, we gotta stay strong. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show.